Hi everyone, it's Brown Jack, a quarterback. With the recent posting of Conor McGregor's video post-surgery, I wanted to get into all of his acknowledgement of losses, whether it's excuses, all of his post-fight comments or reflection on past fights that he's lost since joining the UFC. And I'm going to go through whether there's a decline and whether he's sort of reaching the area of delusion, and I kind of want you to make your own mind up about that, but I'm going to just present some evidence here and let's take a look. Okay, if you aren't familiar with Conor's career initially, this is after the point where he's just beaten Jose Aldo, so he's yet to suffer a loss in the UFC, and he was scheduled to fight Rafael dos Anjos, who was the current 155 champion, to claim a second belt, to become the first person to ever hold two titles simultaneously. Now, the reason this is interesting is because he has been specifically preparing for Rafael dos Anjos in this fight, in the lead up to this fight. So if there was ever a time that he did have a valid excuse for a loss, this would be the time. Because of the opponent change, Rafael dos Anjos gets injured with a broken foot and is then replaced by a short notice NICK DIAZ. So NICK DIAZ is coming in on 12 days notice. But there is a complication with the weight because Nate requests a higher weight, and Conor allows Nate to get his wishes and fights two divisions up. So now Conor's had an opponent change, a completely different style, as opposed to a technical boxer who has high cardio and great Brazilian jiu-jitsu, someone who's been through a lot of wear and tear. He's going to fight a southpaw who's lanky and primarily focuses on boxing and incredible gas tank, also with a very threatening ground game, but only when he's taken down. He'll never actively pursue takedowns. So it's a huge style change-up on short notice. And in this scenario, Conor is believing in himself so much that he truly thinks that he can beat anyone at any time, which, to be fair, was the reason we loved him at this point so much. So this was him at his finest moment. Okay, so after suffering a second round submission defeat to NICK DIAZ, in his most emotional moment, after you lose a fight, you're incredibly emotional, you're fatigued, you're probably feeling very insecure and doubtful, and even the pressure is on you. So he had this to say.
And what went down here tonight?
I took the chance going at 170, but Nate came in.
Okay, so straight away he acknowledges the weight differential here, which is a mistake. It's not him saying that the weight was the reason I lost. It's him saying, I took a chance. Maybe I underestimated the weight being such a huge factor.
He was, I felt I took him the first round, but I was inefficient with my energy.
He's breaking down the fight in his head in saying that he had made a mistake here. This is not too bad. This isn't him being crazy. He did maybe make a mistake, and when you take a loss like that, you're instantly thinking about what you could have done right instead. So he's got every right to say this comment here.
But I'm humble in victory or defeat. I respect Nate. He came in. He took the fight on short notice, came in at 170 and done the job. He was efficient. I wasn't efficient. That was it, I feel.
This is the main moment of his post-fight interview here, because he does talk about himself initially, but he lifts up Nate, and lifting up someone else, especially when you're in a down moment like this, shows how humble you can be and that you understand that no matter what happened on this exact night at this particular time, NICK DIAZ was better than I. And that shows huge maturity in a massive moment like that, because all eyes were on him and he was expected to win this bout. Like I mentioned earlier, the RDA excuse is genuinely a valid excuse, but he never brought it up once here, even though he could have, and I would have been okay with it.
It is what it is. I'll face it like a man, like a champion, and come back and do it again.
What he says here is beautiful, because he's talking about how he will face his demons like a man, and that he's already talking about the possibility of coming back. This means that this kind of fight, he did not get broken, and people respect that kind of character. Even in his low moment, he understands that the future is much brighter. Things like that are hard to focus on at such an extreme moment in his career. The first loss he's taken in the UFC on the biggest stage in one of the biggest selling pay-per-views of all time. Okay, so after putting the Diaz loss behind him, he ends up rematching Nate Diaz, winning by decision, and fights Eddie Alvarez in the division above for 155 to finally get the 55 title at the same time, which he does successfully. His stock now being at an all-time high, he ends up fighting Floyd Mayweather in a sort of circus UFC cross-promotion and boxing fight, which ends up to be the biggest pay-per-view. Right, so I just want to mention a quick side note here that McGregor actually became a father in May of 2017. He went on to fight Floyd Mayweather in August of 2017, which means he's been a father for 3 months. The reason I'm mentioning this is just because a lot of fighters and general parents talk about how their life changes when they have a baby, how they're going to become better in their life in order to teach their child the best possible lessons and things to deal with life. So we should expect an improvement in Conor McGregor's behavior because of the addition of his new son. Making his professional boxing debut, he was not expected to win against 49-0 Floyd Mayweather, arguably one of the GOATs. He went into this fight and lost via 10th round TKO stoppage. After taking a loss to Floyd, here's what he had to say in the post-fight press conference.
It was a good fight. Thought I smoked them the early rounds. I thought I pushed you up the early rounds, but I tell you what, you're one composed individual. You didn't get rattled. You tucked in when you needed to tuck in.
Okay, so firstly, you can just see by his body language and how much he looks like he's actually enjoying himself, even though he's just taken a loss. He looks very relaxed, which tells you that he maybe is already okay with this result completely. I'm not saying he didn't think he couldn't win, but perhaps he was ready for the expectation that he was going to lose this fight. He instantly talks about the fight, saying that he had a good moment, but he also acknowledges Floyd Mayweather straight away. He talks about his composure. He's downloaded the positive things that Floyd did in that fight, and he's able to process them and voice them here in the press conference while in a good mood, which shows a lot of maturity and also just a lot of respect and sportsmanship.
Didn't anticipate that. Three game changes in the fight. That's what a true champion does. Much respect. You came with it. You know what I mean? I got to give respect to that. It was a hell of a fight. I would have liked to see the end of the 10th. I think fatigue, there's like a patch. There's a patch somewhere in the middle of fights, even with the Diaz 2 fight. I have this patch where I must overcome. I get a little wobbly and I start but it's more fatigue and...
Okay, so here he gives more props to Floyd, which is a great gesture. People love to see those sort of things, especially after a long build-up with a lot of trash talk. And then he goes on to talk about his fatigue in this fight. So he's breaking down the technical aspects of where he could have gone better. He's now lifted up Floyd, but he's also analysing himself. And in this moment, he's talking about his fatigue. Now, if you remember from his first loss to Nate Diaz, he talks about how he was inefficient with his energy. Basically, I got tired. In this fight, he talks about it and references it back to the Nate Diaz rematch only, but not the first fight. As in, he's saying that he's corrected the mistakes in the first Nate Diaz fight, but there is still a underlying problem with his fatigue. In my opinion, he has not corrected this because he wouldn't be mentioning it and it wouldn't have shown up in the Nate Diaz first fight, the second fight, or even this Floyd fight. If it showed up in the first Nate Diaz fight, we could put that down to the weight discrepancy, but because it showed up in the second fight with Nate Diaz and also this fight with Floyd, which was contested at 154, there is an underlying problem with his gas tank here. Now we are starting to learn more about his flaws as a fighter.
Hell of a competitor. You've got to give your hat off to Floyd. A hell of a career. Congratulations. I think Floyd's frames were nice when
This press conference actually highlights how great Conor McGregor is as a person, his character. Since becoming a dad, he seems to be taking this loss very well and very mature, and he's saying all the right things. He seems to have almost come to grip with the fact that he has a weakness in his gas tank, but by no means is he using that as an excuse. It's more of him saying that I have this problem. It is what it is. Okay, so after suffering a defeat to Floyd Mayweather, Conor McGregor takes a considerable time off and then proceeds to fight Khabib Nurmagomedov for the 155-pound lightweight title. Now, after this fight, there was a huge post-fight brawl, which meant that Conor McGregor did not do any post-fight interviews after this fight. He then is seen in this video which surfaced months and months later in August of 2019. This incident actually took place in April of 2019 of him punching an old man in a bar. Now, I want to say around this time, there was also 3 sexual assault charges on Conor McGregor. There was the Miami, where he smashed a fan's phone. So we're starting to delve into controversies with Conor McGregor, and he proceeds to do an interview, which we'll take a look at right now.
Year where you appeared to get into an altercation with another man at a bar in Ireland. Could you tell us your side of that story? What happened there?
I mean, in reality, it doesn't matter what happened there. I was in the wrong. That man deserved to enjoy his time in the pub without having it to end the way it did. And although...
Okay, so delving into this, he says all of the right things straight away. However, the interview has only come around because the video has surfaced from TMZ. Had this video never come to light, or had anyone never found out about this, we cannot guarantee that he would have done this interview. Why would he? He's here to do damage control because he's been caught in the act of doing something that's kind of despicable, to be honest. Punching an old man, there's no justification for this. And in that video, it just shows you that he's trying to pour his own liquor for everyone in the pub, but because the gentleman rejects it, he proceeds to punch him directly in the face.
I was in the wrong. I must come here before you and take accountability and take responsibility.
Okay, now I'm not trying to be harsh, but this sounds more scripted than anything, to be completely honest. It sounds very scripted. However, he is still saying the right thing, so at least he's taking responsibility.
The video is a little grainy. Did you in fact punch that man?
Okay, I want you to watch the next clip very, very carefully after this question's been asked. You can not only hear it in his voice, but you can see how uncomfortable this question makes him. If you really did take responsibility, you would say that, but he goes on to say why he can't.
Look, in respect to the whole entire situation, we'll let it play out with what happens with what happens with it. So.
Okay, so he doesn't discuss why he cannot speak on it. He implies that it's a legality thing, and Ariel Helwani actually gives him a free pass here. But I want you to watch what he says in the next clip.
Okay.
What happened was a little hazy for me also. And
now, to be completely honest, this is complete BS. He's completely uncomfortable with this question. He's so uncomfortable. His natural defense here is to come up with a deflection and almost I'm not responsible for this. Even though his initial statement was that he is responsible, he's now so uncomfortable and unsure of himself because of the answers he's giving, because it's not natural. His natural reaction here is to find some kind of out to get the pressure and get him out of the hot seat in this moment.
To be better, to be a better father, to be a better human, to be a better role model to these kids. I know a lot of kids are looking up to me.
Okay, I want you to bear in mind that this is actually the first excuse he's given since he's been in the public light regarding anything, whether it's competition or his personal life. We've never seen this out of him, and he's given an excuse here. He then goes on to a completely different tangent about how he's a role model, and he's saying things to almost sway Ariel's questions into a different direction because he cannot take this pressure anymore of this question that Ariel's just asked. Okay, so due to the post-fight brawl at UFC 229, we've been waiting for Conor to address the Khabib fight and what went wrong, what his thoughts are on the fight, and the very mention of this question, you can see how agitated it makes Conor McGregor, how almost salty he is about this loss still, even though it's almost 1 year on at this point.
That you can beat Khabib. Jump right in there, no tune-up fight, just go back in there and try to avenge that loss.
Yes, dive in, Ariel. I dove in on 1 foot. My foot was a balloon. You want to see it? Do you know what I mean? My toes came out of the socket. A guy had to come into the cage and break them back into place. The thing ballooned out.
Okay, I'm not going to discredit that this injury doesn't exist, but I'm going to firstly preface this by saying that every single fighter who steps in there has got a multitude of injuries, whether small, whether they're big, and he, in his mind, by making this the first thing he mentioned with regards to the Khabib Nurmagomedov loss, means that he's associated the two to be massively linked together, which is not a good thing in my eyes. And also, take a look at this.
25th World Mixed Martial Arts Contest for Conor McGregor.
And that was with a bad camp. That was with a half-committed camp.
Okay, so he just goes on and just does not do himself any favors in this interview, and I just feel as though a lot of people were alienated by this because he did not keep that same energy that he did in the Diaz 1 fight. Okay, so his next bout after Khabib Nurmagomedov was a bout against Donald Cerrone, again, over a year later. However, he did do a pre-fight interview in which he talks about the Khabib fight a little bit more, because those two names, Conor McGregor and Khabib Nurmagomedov, will be forever linked because of how deep their rivalry was.
I'm taking a back step from that and I'm focusing on the skills. It's a very skillful bout. He poses a specific style set, and I pose a specific style set, and it's an interesting clash with two fully focused fighters, and that's what will happen in the next bout, and I look forward to it and settling it.
Okay, so in the build-up to this fight with Donald, he actually was very, very gentlemanly and respectful and polite and courteous, as opposed to the last bout with Khabib. And any damage that he did with his reputation or his fans, with the way he dealt with the Khabib loss, he managed to undo with the way that he built this fight. And in this clip, he's even talking about Khabib and talking about just the logical perspective of it, no emotion involved, and talking about how technically styles do make fights, and that this is a great fight technically because they have such polar opposite skill sets, which is good to see.
That fight will happen again. When you hear him say he's got to win 10 fights and all this stuff,
Yeah.
what is your reaction to that?
Fear, you know, doesn't want it. So it is what it is.
Okay, now Ariel Helwani is actually trying to incite a response out of Conor here because he knows that Khabib is almost like a trigger for Conor. Conor uses not great terminology in describing the reasons for Khabib not wanting another fight, in that it's fear. Khabib beating Conor McGregor by making him tired shows that Conor did not fix his fatigue issues, which he mentioned in the Diaz 1 fight, the Diaz 2 fight, and even the Mayweather fight. And he's programmed it in his mind that Khabib is now scared of him. We're almost reaching the point of delusion here because he's taken a significant loss to Khabib in a very, very bad way. In terms of Conor's body language, when he deals with this question, he does shrug it off fairly quickly though, which almost shows you that he has made some mental gains here. Even though the question annoys him, he's not displaying that it agitates him like he did in the SportsCenter interview previously.
Is that a first for you, or at least first in a while?
I was drinking on Bleeding Fight Week last one, I think. It was on the Conan O'Brien show.
Yes.
But I mean...
Prior to the Khabib fight?
Yeah.
You were drinking in the build-up?
Yeah.
Was that common for you in your career?
Not really. Not to that extent, no. Not to that extent.
Why'd you do that?
Don't know. I had just venom in me.
Okay, now here he talks about his drinking prior to the Khabib fight, and he uses it leisurely in sort of saying like, yes, I over-excessed, and then when Ariel presses him as to why, you can see how he almost instantly regrets it and it's uncomfortable for him. Here, take a look again.
Yeah.
Was that common for you in your career?
Not really. Not to that extent, no. Not to that extent.
Why'd you do that?
Don't know. I had just venom in me.
We're starting to unravel Conor McGregor's excuses and sort of association with this loss, and that he hasn't fully owned it, because he talks about Khabib's fear to stand and strike with him and just go for the takedowns, which is completely false, because Khabib dropped Conor. Yes, he used a takedown to set it up with his herky-jerky sort of style, but he did still land it and drop him. Conor McGregor talks about his drinking during that camp, his foot being injured, so many things to keep picking at, and even a year on, he's continuing to bring up things like this, which is not a good sign. So even if he has become a little bit better, his underlying excuses for the Khabib loss are still lingering in his mind.
People hold up in a hotel from that part of the world, and I would ring and arrange a fight, so they'd come from the hotel down to the gym and have a full blown fight, no head guard, gloves, that's like a fight. I'd win, you know, I'd have a war and I'd win, I'd knock the guy out, and then I'd go off and celebrate, and then I'd come back in 3 days.
3 days? What were you doing?
You know, just, don't know, not doing what I should have been doing.
Celebrating, partying?
Just, I don't know, just not living the life that I should be living, and that's it.
Right.
So I'm not going back there, you know what I mean? I'm in a great spot now, and that's it, and I've made mistakes, and you know, I've been man enough to admit them.
Okay, now here he details the camp, and this is a world championship caliber fighter who knows that he should not have a training camp like this. However, any world champion in the mind would never ever detail this kind of camp if this was the camp they had before a loss. When people do it after a win, it makes them look better, but still you can kind of understand what they're doing. They're trying to pump their win up even more. Not necessarily always by intention, you know. Sometimes they are just going to talk about, I had a rib injury and I still won this fight. Fair play to them. However, this is really alarming. The fact that he is completely in control of his training camp. It appears that the people around him are not actually telling him the right things or giving him the mental gains, or maybe even just knocking him down, saying, you don't know what the hell you're doing. You need to do this ASAP, otherwise we're gone. You know, give him that fear of loss and give him sort of the humility and remind him of how he used to be when he was growing and becoming better. Doing things like this for your camp is not the way to do things, and if you guys allowed that to happen, you're just as much to blame. Okay, so after beating Cowboy Cerrone, he goes on to fight Dustin Poirier for a second time after knocking him out 6 years ago. Now, in this fight, he gets TKO'd in the second round after having a fairly strong first round. And he had this to say in his immediate reaction in the post-fight interview.
Way you expected tonight, your thoughts on how that fight transpired?
You know, it's hard to overcome inactivity over long periods of time, and that's just it. Wasn't, you know, the leg kicks were good. That low calf kick was very good. The leg was dead, and then just wasn't as comfortable as I needed to be. You know what I mean? It's the inactivity, and that's it. But Dustin's a some fighter, and you know, you're in here. If you put in the time in here, you're gonna get cozy in here, and that's it. I have to dust it off and come back, and that's it, and that's what I will do.
Okay, so this is a much better approach from Conor, considering that what we've just discussed regarding the Khabib fight. He's instantly assessed the fight and put it down to the inactivity being the reason why he lost. He basically feels as though he can beat Dustin, but the inactivity has held him back, but then goes on to lift up Dustin and say, that was a beautiful game plan, your leg kicks were amazing, I'll come back stronger, and I need to be more active, basically. So he's correcting his mistakes, or about to correct his mistakes, and this is not an excuse by any means. He actually handles this loss perfectly in my eyes.
Feel like he is in a state of terror right now?
Of course, he's trembling. Like, even after the last win, Ariel, I don't like this anymore. I don't want to do this anymore. Imagine after your biggest win, you're saying that, because he knows he got electrocuted in both rounds. He got rattled. I had him out on his feet in both rounds, multiple times in the first and even in the second, a bad one in the second. So, you know, he knows the shots he ate, and he's going to eat a hell of a lot more of them, that's for sure.
Now, while Conor is playing some mind games here, talking about Dustin not wanting to do this anymore, he is actually at his most confident because he's just finished his training camp. So he probably feels like he can do anything right now, which is why he appears to voice it more about him basically having Dustin on skates, which is a bit of an exaggeration. He did definitely buzz Dustin, but he's framed it in his mind as though I was so close to winning, I just needed to do this. It wasn't about what Dustin did now. He stopped basically adopting that mindset. When he did the post-fight interview 6 months before this interview, right in the cage, he was at his most emotional, you know, your confidence is rocked, it's a bitter pill to swallow. He says all these words, and he's able to basically give the credit to Dustin. But now it appears that when he goes into a training camp, his focus is that I just needed to do this and I would have won, not they did this so I lost. So it's a very different shift of mindset. It almost appears as though he's got an alter ego when he trains, and when that person comes on the mic, he has a different story.
Happen. I sparked him in 60 seconds the first time. I had him out on his feet in the second one. If I knocked him out there in that second fight, Ariel, this wouldn't be what this is. It would have been like, you were supposed to knock him out.
You have to keep in mind Conor's ability with his words. He's able to frame things in a way where it will allow you to believe it, even without any sufficient evidence. But he's subtly saying here, I did not have the motivation for this fight. So he's already talked about how he could have knocked him out, and now he's also mentioning that, I don't have the motivation for this. I didn't have the motivation for that fight.
You know, just the way things have shaped out, I felt pity for the guy, to be honest. I do feel a bit of pity for a lot of people in it's been solely mixed martial arts, this camp. There's been no distractions. The last camp was 75% boxing. It was 70, even 80%. preparation for Manny Pacquiao. You know what I mean? I had a whole team of people that were specifically for Manny as far as body shape and type and all of this type of crack. And then I also had my wrestling coach. My wrestling coach isn't with me also at the minute either. It's not just the boxing.
Okay, so there was no mention of any of these in the immediate aftermath to his first loss to Dustin in January, but he's using these as unlimited amount. Basically, he continues to rattle off excuses like they're just going. He started off great, and then he continues to rattle them off, and it's coupled with a sales tactic for him to persuade the fans to believe in him again.
Did you feel like that boxing training led to the defeat in January? Did you feel like that was
I got a lot of benefits out at the for sure. You know what I mean? If you're doing multiple spars, and some of those heavy spars are boxing spars, your MMA spar is not going to be. It was hard to fit them both in at the same time.
Same type of game plan.
That's all he knows. All he has. He's crapping his bags earlier, I think. He shot in 20 seconds of the first round. 20 seconds in, he almost shot as fast as the Dagestani, who shot 15 seconds into the first round. So they fight me afraid. They fight afraid. They back away. They shell up. They dive for the legs.
Okay, so here he's just continuing to press on with excuses and basically be in complete denial about it. And then he goes on to talk about the actual tactical element of the fight. And he's getting to a point where he's almost complaining that people are wrestling him. It's kind of sad to see, to be completely honest, because when you see a fighter do that, an MMA fighter, it just means that they're not well versed. And instead of him approaching his lack of skills in a certain area, he's blaming the opponent for choosing to go for that game plan, which is an obvious weakness in his game. And to be honest, it's a brilliant move by Dustin and a brilliant move by Khabib, and he should have said that was a good game plan rather than saying that their game plan shows how afraid they are to stand with me.
Knockdown wasn't even a knockdown. It was just a right hook that stepped me on the leg that was immobilized, and I went down. It was the shot that followed that. But it was a flash. I was up in seconds. I was alert, everything. Look at the way remember when I bounced his head off the canvas like a basketball.
Okay, now this here is another massive red flag, and you can see how fast he tries to deflect it back onto how he knocked out Dustin, just because he knows he got knocked out, but for some reason it's so uncomfortable he has to shelter it, hide it, and he doesn't even want to admit that he got knocked out. He's not man enough to admit it. Every interview where Dustin talks about his initial loss to Conor, he says, yeah, he caught me, he clipped me, I was emotional, and he knocked me out. And take a look at this clip here. It's not the ending you should look at when the fight has been stopped. It's when he gets dropped, the sequence of punches. Just watch his face and you can see he's clearly out. Clearly, without a doubt, 100% out.
Mixed martial arts competition is 19 wins and 1 loss. I only count knockouts. Dustin's record is 13 wins, 2 losses. The only thing that's final in this business is a knockout. All the other the decisions, the taps, all that means nothing to me. I'm coming to take a man's head off, and that's it. You know what I mean? I was.
Now, this entire fight week, before this fight, it felt like he was almost projecting or desperate to get some kind of energy out there, some kind of aggression, get in Dustin's head, but it felt more forced than anything. And when he says comments like this, it just, to be honest, puts him way down. I mean, we're talking about a guy with 3 kids now. His maturity, his confidence is being faked. His maturity has gone down. His ability to accept a loss has gone down. He's talking about things that are completely irrelevant. He's gone completely off the rails. Okay, now after suffering another defeat to Dustin Poirier via doctor stoppage at the end of round 1, his post-fight interview immediately comes into this.
What's your thoughts on how it was going?
I was boxing the bleeding head off him, kicking the bleeding leg off him. He dived to close the distance.
That is what broke your leg.
There was no check. There was not one of them I checked.
Okay, now he's displaying a completely different energy post-fight. Let me just preface this by saying the guy has just broken his leg in a very gruesome way. He's also just suffered a defeat, and it's against a guy he probably thinks he can beat in his sleep, which he's programmed himself to believe he can beat in his sleep. But he actually does kick the knees of Dustin on about 3 kicks with maximum power. And he doesn't acknowledge that at all. And Dustin did. And I'm not saying that he has to say Dustin's right, but he should admit that he maybe did kick in the wrong spot. Instead, he says that it was nothing to do with Dustin, that he was doing everything perfect. He was on the way to KOing him. But he was losing that round 10-8 in two of the judges' eyes. He was getting smashed on the ground. And yes, he had a good first 45 seconds of the first round, but he's not known to be a good performer as the fight progresses. That's Dustin's skill. So yes, while he had a possibility where he could have won in the second round, or I don't know, won later in the fight, which is unlikely. He's never had a finish past the second round. Dustin was actually outboxing him overall, outstriking him, outkicking him, took him down, ground and pounded him far worse than he was landing any shots on the bottom. And he looked visibly fatigued when they stood up.
Yeah, no, Dustin, you can celebrate that illegitimate win all you want, but you've done nothing in there. That second round would have shown all. And, you know, onwards and upwards we go.
Okay, now while perhaps the result wasn't 100% definitive, over the course of 3 fights, it's clear to see who the better fighter is. Dustin is the better fighter overall, and this is just massively worrying, to be honest. He's gone past delusion, even past it. He's even had a few days to think about it at this point, and it's not registering.
I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna come back. The leg is better than ever. I was injured going into the fight. Let's point to the leg break. Ask Dana White, ask the UFC, ask Dr. Davidson, the head doctor of the UFC. They knew I had stress fractures in my leg going into that cage. There was debate about pulling the thing out because I was sparring with no shin pads and I kicked the knee a few times.
Okay, now in my opinion, he's fully gone now. He's way past the point of delusion. He's just continuing to create an insurance policy for his losses. He's always got a reason. He's become worse mentally, and I feel as though his coaches have a part to play in that. While they may be very skilled tactically, technically, and in terms of ability in teaching him things, John Kavanagh, when he met Conor McGregor, he told a story about how Conor had a massive ego when he joined the gym, and John Kavanagh rolled with Conor and destroyed him, basically taught him a massive lesson through physical abuse to say, hey, you're not the man here. And it feels as though that kind of teaching has completely gone, which is why he initially was very humble, was able to process losses, and now he just has no answer for losses. He just thinks he's the only thing that went wrong, or certain things went wrong in his camp, and that was it. It's nothing to do with the opponent anymore. He then proceeded to post these tweets and these pictures, and John Kavanagh basically confirms exactly what I'm saying. Okay, so here he actually tweets about how he's got a 4-part Netflix documentary series coming out and how no one else would have been able to do what he did. I have to be honest here in saying that this was not the right publicity move to make. He's completely strafing and sidetracking away from the loss, and he's trying to say that it was an injury that that he went in the fight with. He openly chose to take that fight, and that's why he says ask Dana, ask the doctors, because he wants validation from them, a credible source or someone that the fans may find as a credible source to back up and support his claims. And I just want to say I believe he's clutching here. Now, he's got a lot of pictures that he uploads here, and yes, while he says he is filming a Netflix documentary, it appears as though the pictures he's taken here, he almost knew he was going to use these. That's the way it feels, and he is using them now. And you can see by John Kavanagh's tweet here that he's completely in support of this and doesn't feel like there's anything wrong with the way his fight is behaving. I understand that fighters should have some level of delusion in order to think that they're the best and that they will be the best, but I think he's gone a bit too far off. Just let me know what you guys think. I'm sure I've missed so much information here, and I'd love to know your thoughts. If you guys think I'm right, if you think I'm wrong, or if you guys have any other thoughts. Regardless of what happens, I'd like to see what Conor McGregor does once he returns from injury, hopefully fully healthy, even though it is quite a bad one, and I do genuinely wish he can come back just as strong. And I'd personally like to see him fight Tony Ferguson next. I think that fight makes a lot of sense. Just want to say I hope you guys can like this video because it took me a long time to make. If you could comment on the video and if you could subscribe to my channel, Brown Jack Quarterback. There's going to be a lot more content coming. The video quality is going to continue to get better. And I just want to say thank you to everyone who's watched this. It means so much. It's such a long video, I know, but if you've made it to the end, then I truly appreciate you greatly. And even if you didn't, that's okay as well. Just want to say love you guys. Thanks so much. And until the next one, peace.